Grace, hello. Thank you for coming this morning to
Thanks
see
for
our
having me.
I know that you've been encouraging people about their greatness, that we're all great, because we're made by a great God who dwells in us, and therefore we are great, and it's fine to, and even better than fine, it is wonderful and meant to be that we live in that shape. So would you like to just say a little bit more about that?
Gladly. I think this is one of the keys to us really embodying what we see Jesus doing. So there is the supernatural that in our generation and in our times, most of us agree, probably a lot of us have heard, actually we can do what Jesus did. We're actually called to do that. And I think the key, one of the keys to walking in that is being able to see yourself as God sees you. And I guess a short phrase that I've come to know it as, is know your greatness. So knowing your greatness is to see yourself as God sees you. And that confronts all of the normal, is what has become very normal for most of us, lies about ourselves or just self-limiting beliefs that in our culture, and I'm going to talk about England because that's where we are at the moment, but certainly in English culture it's become quite normal to think that just a little bit less about yourself, about your skills, because it's considered arrogant to really believe that you might be the best at something or could be the best at something, although we love achievement in our nation. But to admit that, if someone does that at a dinner party, you can feel a bit bristly, or certainly at church, you wonder, well, are you walking in humility? And I've come to see, from being at Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, so I really have to reference them for this, but I've spent the last few years coming to understand that true humility is seeing yourself as God sees you. And that creates the foundation with which to then do what Jesus called us to do. Because Jesus is the ultimate leader, he's the ultimate embodiment of our faith. And he leads in so many ways, and you can see so many facets of his leadership, and one thing he walks in is a true understanding that he is a son of God. And it was absolutely heretical for him to say that at the time. But actually I think it's still a bit heretical, because he is the Son of God. So for us to say, I'm a son of God, we're still grappling with that, but we're really getting it now, which is you are a son or a daughter of Christ. To say, sorry, of God, you are a friend of Christ, that God's work in you is making you more like Christ. And we're used to hearing that, but actually what that means is that you're becoming more like God.
So I think you've also been talking today about being like Christ, being sons and daughters in the day-to-day. So being able to be encouraged in a moment with others, and then taking that forward on a day-to-day basis. Can you talk about that as well?
Yeah, that would be the step on. So you're realising who you are being called to be. We're realising, okay, Jesus called us to do his works. God's work in our life is to make us more like him. Therefore, greatness is going to come out of us because we're going to see the works of Christ happening. Now, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? That looks like you believing the prophetic words of your life. If you haven't got a prophetic word, find one. Understand what the prophetic is, understand what apostolic and all the gifts that are listed in the New Testament that we get as believers. Some are more gifted than others in certain ways, but we're all full to the full measure. We're being filled to the full measure of Christ.
So if we can ground that a bit, if someone's at work and somebody's just pressed their button, what does it mean to hang on to a prophetic word? What do you mean?
So what that means is that you believe that Christ is in you, therefore everything that God is, you can do, you can function in. So you might have your buttons being pressed at that time, but you say, God, you say I can do all things. You say that your grace is enough. Therefore I have the ability to not respond in this way, blow up at them, accuse them, frustrated, harbour resentment. I can actually act like I see you acting, which is with peace. You turn the other cheek. What does that mean? You basically choose to ask God, how do you see them, God? Because I want to respond to that person how you see them. Because I don't need to act out of my flesh. I need to act out of what you see in that person. Because right now my flesh is saying, no, I don't want to hear from it because it's reacting.
And you talked about not living out of your flesh in the way in issues of confidence in the day-to-day things as well. And almost being able to take a step aside in effect. Is there? I can't quote you from this morning, but there's a flavour of that, I think, that I heard.
Yeah, if I'm right in what you're saying, is that being comfortable with seeing yourself as God sees you, even if you at the moment don't feel like you're walking that, but taking those prophetic words taking the encouraging words that you've heard from others and saying, God, I'm going to turn those into declarations in my daytime. Like, I am confident, I am fearless, I am courageous, I'm great with money, I'm a really good mother, I'm a really good wife. Whatever area that it is that you feel like, I think there's a greater revelation of you in that God, of you, all of you through all of me.
And choosing not to be rattled.
And choosing not to be rattled.
bold.
Choosing to be bold. But again, that constantly looks like, I think in any level of walking with God, it's, God, how do you see it? And that's the everyday prophetic. Is God, show me how you see it and help my emotions line up with it. Because he might give you a scripture, he might just show you the person and their brokenness, he might just give you suddenly a heart for this person that's pressing your buttons. Whatever it is, God can do it in any number of ways. But as you partner with that, day on day, you're going to start to be able to influence on a level that was so much more than you could have imagined, because you're partnering with God for it, not just your great ideas.
Sounds good to me. Let's partner with God in the everyday.
Sing a song of hope, sing along, God.